Well, welcome into the Most Accurate Podcast. My name is Anthony Stalter, and I'm joined, as always, by John Paulsen, who is the man, the 4for4.com senior analyst. He does all your fantasy football rankings throughout the year. And John, this is the first time I can't help but think back to the very first time you and I ever attempted to do a podcast. And we've talked about this before, and I promise you we'll get into all the great content that we have for you today, as week one started last night. We're recording on Friday, if you know. But John, I can't help but think back the very first time you and I did a podcast. I believe we did it over actual phones. I don't know if it was a cell phone at that point or an actual corded phone, but I was the analyst and you were actually the host. And eventually, once we got to 4for4.com, who's been just a tremendous host for us. Then, of course, you became the rightful analyst, and I was doing the hosting. And we just built this podcast slowly. And now we actually have video with an editor. So I think this means we made it big.
Yeah, this is crazy being on video with you after all these years. I think it was 2005, 2006 when we did our first podcast or somewhere around there. Pretty crazy that after all these years, we're finally live. Now, we're not live streaming, but we are recording a video and putting this up on YouTube and everything. So excited to be here to talk about some football.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. So we've come a long way. But John, it is good to see you. It's great to kick off another season of fantasy football. Drafts are done, and people are excited. And why don't we start off with, let's just jump right into it. Let's get into your Thursday night takeaways. The Bills hammer the Rams. It was only 10-10 at halftime. But if you were watching that game, you had a sense that the Bills really – they had control of it. They had control of it from the onset. The Rams were sloppy offensively. And if it weren't for 4 turnovers by Buffalo, that's probably a 51-10 score as opposed to 31-10. But from a fantasy perspective, what were some of your main takeaways from last night's game?
Yeah, and you described it exactly correct. It just felt like the Bills were hungrier. I think that's what kind of happens there when you lose to KC in the playoffs, a tough loss. You have all offseason to sort of stew about it.
Okay.
And then the Rams, of course, win the Super Bowl. So they kind of come out like, chest pups. They're playing at home. They're feeling good about themselves, and maybe they're feeling themselves a little too much. To your question, like, what were my takeaways? I really, it didn't shock me, but it was a little surprising that Darrell Henderson got the start. And then I kind of thought, okay, they're probably just going to rotate series with Cam Akers, because they sort of talked about Cam Akers as the de facto starter. But they did. Sean McVay did sort of prepare us for a time split, right? But it was 18-3 touches, Henderson to Akers. Akers didn't look good. I think he had 3 carries for 0 yards, picking up where he left off late last year with his 1.88 yards per carry after the Achilles comeback, which, I'm rooting for him. I want him to buck the trend for Achilles injuries with running backs. But just all offseason, we kind of got this these drips from McVay saying that we're probably not going to have the Cam Akers bell cow usage that we saw late last year. So we were telling our subscribers, don't target Akers in the 4th, 5th round. Instead, when in these sort of situations, you want to get Henderson late. And I think quite a few 4for4 subscribers did. And now, it looks like he might be the clear RB1. And it might just be, we're going to, ease Akers back in. But it seems weird that he played so much late last year in the Super Bowl run, and then now he's barely playing. It was 55-12, the snap share between Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers. So that was one takeaway. Another takeaway is the Allen Robinson situation. Where is he? I saw some, pictures of him on the side of milk cartons floating around on Twitter. But, I think, I have to look at the, what defense that the Bills played. I think everybody was anticipating they play a lot of zone, and Cooper Kupp just eats against zone. So that might just be a kind of a defensive scheme thing that worked in against Robinson. He played 97% of the snaps. So I think better days are probably ahead. I think people are jumping to conclusions that he can't separate anymore or whatever, but I would like to see him in maybe a different game. And just before I would really start to panic with him getting that many snaps in this offense. I mean, we know this is a really productive offense, passing attack, and then the number 2 receiver there, Robert Woods, and then Odell Beckham last year. They posted fantasy wide receiver 2 numbers. So not panicking on Robinson yet. Might be a good time to throw out a trade offer if you want to go get him. And then the third takeaway was my man Isaiah McKenzie, who had one catch and then he had a bobble, and I was just like, oh no, he's gonna go to the bench after the interception that he sort of created. But they brought him back in, so that was good. And he caught a touchdown on a slant, which is nice to see. Josh Allen looking for him in the red zone. Ran a really nice patient route, as I think Collinsworth mentioned. And he, didn't have a ton of targets in this game. He played 44% of the snaps. Jamison Crowder played 31% of the snaps. Then they also had Jake Kumaro playing quite a bit, which I thought was kind of surprising. So if it's going to be sort of Gabriel Davis, 98% of the snaps, Stephon Diggs, 64% of the snaps, I think was the number, or maybe that was numbers. I think that was the percentage. And then McKenzie, Crowder, and Kumaro sort of splitting the wide receiver 3 spot. That, McKenzie's not going to be the consistent producer that we were hoping for. If he needs to get 50, 60% of the snaps, I think, to be a really consistent producer. He only saw 3 targets. Crowder only saw 4, but he created an interception as well. Crowder did. So I think they're probably square on that. So those are my takeaways. I'm not panicking on McKenzie at all, but it was good to see him get in the end zone after that interception that he caused.
Yeah, and if I can add my 2 cents, and if you're just tuning in to the Most Accurate Podcast, or if you've been with us for a while, John's got you covered from anything fantasy related, certainly football as well. But he's got the numbers, he's got the percentages, he's got John. I know you go back and you watch film, and you're looking at preseason snaps even, and kind of looking at some of the rookies in college ball and things like that. And then I try to add maybe some perspective as well from an X's and O's standpoint. This is going to sound somewhat ridiculous because Cooper Kupp was targeted 15 times and he caught 13 passes, but it's really tough to get your offense going when your quarterback is being rushed with only 4. That's what Buffalo did. They rushed 4. They didn't rush 5. It's not like Matthew Stafford was blitzed a lot, and Stafford is excellent when it comes to dealing with only 4 down linemen. But Von Miller had 2 sacks. A couple other guys were in his face constantly. And as a quarterback, if you can't get to your 5th step, your 7th step, you're not hitting guys on the outside. You don't have time. Throw in the fact that Allen Robinson and Matthew Stafford maybe not on the same page yet. Stafford dealing with the shoulder injury, and maybe you just don't have that chemistry. So I agree with John. I think, John, you bring up a great point in terms of just, if you even want to target Allen Robinson, if you got one impatient, frustrated owner that's like, fine, forget it, I'm out on Allen Robinson, now's the time to go get him, because I do think he's going to still have a productive season. And as you outlined with Odell Beckham and certainly Robert Woods, there's plenty of target shares in that Rams offense to go around. Let's get into this week's biggest fantasy storylines, and we're going to start off with George Kittle. And it doesn't look like, John, that the 49ers tight end is going to play. He's dealing with a groin injury. He did not practice on Thursday. We're recording fairly early on Friday, so we don't have an opportunity to see what the Friday injury report's going to be. But do you anticipate that the 49ers are going to be without George Kittle?
Yeah, it doesn't sound good. He injured his groin on Monday, and so it's a really kind of a late-breaking sort of injury this week. And talking to our injury expert Adam Hutchinson, he thinks he's going to miss at least 1 game, probably 2, and maybe 3. So it might be a while before we see George Kittle. Yesterday, in our locking our draft rankings at the end of the draft season. At kickoff last night, I moved Kittle down a few spots because it just looks like I just assumed he was going to miss 2 games in addition to the typical games that a tight end misses throughout the season. So he ended up dropping down into the mid tight end 1, lower end tight end 1 rankings as far as projections, because we're looking at what this player can produce, and he's got maybe a game or 2 games fewer to produce it in. So I think for the short term, this is not great for Trey Lance. It's probably good for Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. And I think Tyler Kroft is the backup tight end there now, so he might be a kind of a surprise play. I don't think we're in a situation right now where we have to play a lot of sneaky starts because most everybody's healthy heading into week 1. But he might be a good DFS, just dart throw, minimum player type or minimum price type player, Kroft, because of just the way things are shaping up right now with Kittle likely out.
Let's move on to Deontay Johnson now, the Steelers wide receiver. He's dealing with a shoulder injury, got in some limited work in practice on Wednesday and on Thursday. For what it's worth, both George Pickens and Chase Claypool said that Johnson looked good in practice. Where do you have Deontay Johnson ranked right now, and what do you think about his prospects for week 1?
Yeah, I dropped him down a bit in the draft rankings too, since it seems iffy that he's going to be able to play in the first week. Certainly in this week, he's dropped down. I wanted people to play Gabriel Davis if they had the option over Deontay heading into week 1. So I wanted to make that clear in the rankings since he's kind of iffy. I think yesterday it was cramps he was listed with, which I don't know if I've ever seen cramps as an injury listing for a player to be limited. But it did seem like there was a bit of positivity about his status for Sunday. Listening to his comments, he sounded pretty frustrated. Whenever a player sounds frustrated like that, it leads me to believe that they're kind of getting their head around the idea that they're not going to play. So I'm interested to see what happens today and what the injury report says. I'm not exactly sure when the Steelers play. Are they early or?
They're the early game.
Yeah, so at least we'll know. Fantasy owners will know. Thank you for that assist there, Anthony. I didn't pull up my schedule, but at least we'll know, early on Sunday whether or not he's going to be available. If he's out, George Pickens, Chase Claypool, Calvin Austin will be in. Calvin Austin probably gets the biggest bump from a playing time standpoint, but I would probably look at Pickens and Claypool as maybe startable, and then Freiermuth might see an extra couple targets. I mean, Deontay Johnson is such a big part of that offense. 20% plus target share every year, just rock solid. So if he's out, then that's going to really distribute some targets elsewhere.
So moving on to Chris Godwin now, the Bucs wide receiver, as people know, he had his knee surgically repaired. He did actually participate fully on Wednesday. He sat out Thursday. It seems like the Bucs might be testing out whether or not that knee can kind of handle playing on Sunday. Now the Bucs play on Sunday night. My question would be, John, it does appear like Chris Godwin might suit up. The question is, what's the snap count going to be, and then how effective he is? I'm sure fantasy owners that got Chris Godwin a little bit later in their drafts might be excited to see that he could play, but I can't imagine that he's going to see enough production to merit a fantasy start. But what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so having done this for 12 years or so, you've seen this kind of scenario play out a bit. It was odd that he was full and then a DNP. Now, two things could be happening there. He could have had a setback, which I don't think was what's happening because they didn't mention anything about a setback, but they could have been doing, okay, we're going to go full. We're going to see how the knee responds and how you feel on Thursday. And then if everything's good, we'll go full or limited on Friday. And then, make a game time decision, see how you're feeling on Sunday night. The issue here is that they play Sunday night game. So there's not a lot of great pivots unless you have a Russell Gage or a Julio Jones. I think that's, doable if you wanted to, wait on Godwin. I think the one thing that is key here is that you probably shouldn't be waiting on Godwin. I love Chris Godwin. Everybody knows I love Chris Godwin ever since he was available in the 5th round so many years ago and broke out. But the issue here is I talked about it in the preseason. They aren't trying to get Godwin ready for week 1. So they just want him ready when he's ready. They've been saying that to the reporters, to Stefania Bell from ESPN, talking to him. When he's ready, they'll have him out there. And I think that this is a team with Super Bowl aspirations. So they're not going to rush Godwin back, not when they have Evans, Gage, Julio Jones signed now. So even if he does play, I think he'll probably be his snaps will be limited. I'm sort of expecting like 75% of what he would usually play. He's usually a 95% type snap player. So I would expect that to be cut at, by 25% at least, and he might only play 50% of the snaps or something like that. And then, so he's not a player that I'm looking at as somebody that's likely to score wide receiver 1 type numbers if he plays. So you should probably have a better option on your bench, especially given the time frame of this game. They play the Cowboys. There's not a great pivot option for the Cowboys. Broncos, maybe a Jerry Jeudy, and then the Seahawks, maybe a Tyler Lockett. So I know in one of my leagues, I'm going to start Tyler Lockett, and then if Godwin plays, I'll have a decision to make. But those are the teams that are playing at the same time or later than the Buccaneers on Sunday.
So let's transition to Allen Lazard, and listeners know that you're a Packers fan. If you look at so the things that are going on right now in Packers camp, and Matt LaFleur talking about how Allen Lazard was stepped on, did not practice, the issues, or at least early on in camp, the issues between Aaron Rodgers and maybe some of his young wide receivers and being on the same page. What's your thoughts on Allen Lazard as we approach week 1?
So he got his foot stepped on. This has been a very difficult receiving core to project all preseason because we just don't know who's going to be out there on a weekly basis. Sammy Watkins has some talent, but can't stay healthy. Randall Cobb is one of Rodgers' favorite targets, but he's older. We don't know how many games he's going to be able to play or how effective he's going to be for 17 games. Romeo Doubs has been the one consistently lauded receiver amongst this rookie class heading in. And then Christian Watson obviously was the big trade up to get him at the top of the second round. And then they've got Amari Rodgers, the third rounder from last year. So, a lot of moving pieces. I think this might be a season where they've got a bunch of guys in that 400 to 600 yard receiving range, and we just don't have a clear starter every week. I think Lazard's probably that best bet for that because Rodgers has talked about him as the wide receiver 1 and obviously has a lot of familiarity with him. So he's probably the best bet to go, for 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. But if he's not out there, then I think Doubs is an interesting sleeper because he's probably wide receiver 4 right now. And if Lazard is out, he probably moves into the starting lineup alongside Sammy Watkins, who's healthy. And he says he's feeling sharp, and Cobb in the slot. Now, with that said, Sammy Watkins is known for week 1 explosions and then disappearing. So he might be a fun DFS play, or if you're playing in a league where you have a huge lineup that you start, you might want to plug in Watkins if Lazard is out because he does have Aaron Rodgers throwing in the ball. He has a history of week 1 production, and the Vikings last year were among the worst teams in pass defending receivers. So from a fantasy points allowed standpoint. So it's going to be a confusing year. I'm interested to see in terms of snap shares the first few weeks with this team. I loaded up on a lot of Doubs in the 11th to 13th round because it just seemed like when Rodgers is talking about a rookie like that, that's a really good sign.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, let's talk about J.K. Dobbins. A lot of people have been waiting for the former Ohio State Buckeye running back to kind of, make his appearance in the NFL. Now, he missed all of last season with the knee injury. So this was interesting. Jamison Hensley, who's the ESPN Baltimore Ravens reporter, he tweeted out what Lamar Jackson had to say after he was asked about J.K. Dobbins and whether or not, he's getting better. And Lamar said, yeah, he's getting better every day. Hopefully he'll be out in a couple of weeks. Do you think that Lamar Jackson indicated that his running back, one of his running backs, is not going to play? Not only is he not going to play in week 1, he might not play in maybe the majority of September.
Yeah, this is, I don't want I'm sorry for laughing because it's a guy's injury and he's trying to get back. But right. The reason I was laughing is that Dobbins has been clapping back at Ian Rappaport and whoever is out there talking about him on Twitter. He obviously searches his name to see what's being said about him. And he has said all along that he's going to play week 1. I don't know that I believe him. John Harbaugh has been kind of talking him up a little bit this week in terms of him ascending or getting better as this week has gone on. So just sort of waiting to see what the situation is with him. And the Ravens looks like they play early, so that's good for fantasy owners to know. But Dobbins is not somebody I have like in any of my teams. I have not been targeting. I've been fading him pretty hard, just due to this whole thing. And then also when he is healthy, is he in a timeshare or is he a lead like bell cow back? Because they've been doing a timeshare there, for several years now. The last time Dobbins played, he split time with Gus Edwards, who's also pretty effective, efficient runner. And I don't think he's just going to go away. So if Dobbins sits, you're probably looking at Mike Davis or Kenyon Drake. You're probably looking at both of them as a timeshare. And I bet whoever's looking better on game day probably gets more touches. Davis probably will start because he's been there quite a bit longer than Drake. But, looking at the PFF grades last year, Drake was pretty much better in every aspect of the game than Mike Davis. Although two years ago in Carolina, Mike Davis had some good advanced stat type numbers, breaking tackles, yards after contact per attempt, and might be a little bit better running the ball up the middle. So the Jets. The interesting thing here is that the Jets were like 32nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. So there is a good matchup here. It's just we don't have any idea who it's going to be. If Dobbins is active, then he kind of becomes an interesting sort of DFS dart throw, because why would they have him out there if he's not ready for 15 touches and he's going in against the Jets, who they can probably look at and say we can beat the Jets without Dobbins. I think that's maybe the Ravens are thinking that. So if they do play him, maybe they're going to give him some workload. But if they do sit him, maybe it's not a death knell to Dobbins in week 2 or week 3. To your point though about Lamar Jackson, I think maybe he let the cat out of the bag, and the feeling might be with the team that Dobbins is not going to be back for another week or 2.
So hopefully all that sets up for is a huge day out of Lamar Jackson, because as you know, John, I took Lamar Jackson in our fantasy draft, and it segues perfectly into our sleeper sneaky start of the week. And you might be asking yourself, well, what's sleeper? Does it mean sleeper as in this is John's sleeper for the week? Yeah, it's kind of twofold, I guess, it's a play on words, but no, sleeper is as John and I know, because we have used Sleeper now for a couple of years now, but Sleeper is one of the fastest growing customizable fantasy football platforms in the industry. If you head to sleeper.com, download the latest, or you could download the latest app. John and I both have both. In fact, when we did our draft, I did it off my phone. When I'm making my adjustments, it's usually on my laptop. So both platforms are easy to use. We certainly love Sleeper. And John, as you know, a couple of years ago, I would always gripe, and I won't say what the name is, but I would always gripe about the previous fantasy site that we used in our keeper league. I was like, this is not user friendly. I don't know what I don't know where I can go to even set my lineup. This is where are the waiver wire pickups? Like it was frustrating. We get to the draft, it was difficult, but not with Sleeper. Sleeper is user friendly for a guy like me that's not tech. John is tech savvy. I am not. But for somebody like me, Sleeper is extremely easy to use, and we certainly love it in our keeper league.
Yeah, and my sleeper sneaky start of the week this week is Elijah Moore. Now, there are going to be some people out there that are upset that I'm using Elijah Moore, who's a fantasy wide receiver 3, as my sleeper sneaky start of the week. But
you can't make everybody happy.
I definitely bumped him up this week. I had him ranked in the mid-30s draft rankings, but this week, especially against the Ravens. Now, the Ravens were pretty banged up in the secondary last year. They really struggled against the pass, but they've always been good against the run. So I think the Jets are going to have a tough time running the ball. They got Joe Flacco at quarterback. In Joe Flacco's one start last year, Elijah Moore had 8 catches for 141 yards and a touchdown on 11 targets. Flacco came in the previous game in relief of Zach Wilson when he got injured. I think it was Wilson, or maybe it was White, but he came in relief the previous week. He completed 3 passes, 2 of them in 6 snaps. 2 of them were to Moore. So 2 for 2 to Moore for 40 yards and a touchdown. So just from a game plus 6 snaps sample, it seems like he has a really nice rapport with Elijah Moore. Garrett Wilson right now is the wide receiver 4. Corey Davis should be okay as the number 2 option, and Braxton Berrios is playing in the slot. So I think Moore is not seeing much target competition, especially from Joe Flacco, who seems to really love him. So I like him a lot this week. I've got him ranked in the low 20s. I think he's a great play in DFS, and I'm going to start him in our sleeper league, Anthony, and just a really great route runner and shaping up for a great week against the Ravens.
I was really excited because I have Stephon Diggs in our league, John, and he had a nice night. Then I looked and my competition had Cooper Kupp. So yeah. I'm already trailing, but at least I matched them a little bit. All right, let's get to some of your sneaky starts that aren't the sleeper sneaky start of the week, but some of the other sneaky starts. And this is one of my favorite segments. Now, we only give you a taste. If you go to 4for4.com, you can see John's full article. He has a breakdown of quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Gives you different options, tells you why. Some, as John just noted, might not be viewed as all that sneaky, but then he gives you a couple of long shots if you're in a jam. It's a great article to read all the way through. Especially if you play DFS too, because if you play some DFS, you're always looking for some value savers. I use John's article not only for my league long fantasy teams, but for DFS as well. So I implore you to go to 4for4.com and check out the entire article. But let's give people a taste, and we'll give one player per position here, John. Why don't we start off with the quarterback? And you're going to talk about a quarterback that is still near and dear to my heart, despite the fact that he's playing for another team.
Yeah, it's got to be weird for you to see Matt Ryan in a different uniform, huh?
Very weird. But honestly, I'm happy for him, and I'm kind of rooting. Falcons are going to have the number 1 or number 2 pick next year, so I'm going to root for the Colts too for Matt Ryan. He deserves to win.
Yeah, probably it was like seeing Brett Favre and the Jets and the Vikings uniforms. Yeah, Matt Ryan, I think it's a nice start this week. And this article, I try to focus on players that are ranked higher than usual due to either matchups or some injuries ahead of them. So it ranges from a player like Elijah Moore, who might be, I might bench him, I might start him, all the way down to somebody you can pick up off your waiver wire and plug into your lineup. So just everybody understand that, please. Matt Ryan, the interesting thing about Matt Ryan is that reading a lot of these preseason reports about training camp is how much faster he gets them in and out of the huddle than somebody like Carson Wentz. The Colts were super slow last year in terms of seconds per play. I think they might have been last in the league. Talked about this a little bit on Wednesday. The Falcons, I think, were 5th in terms of fastest seconds per play. So from a fantasy standpoint, we like that because we're going to get more offensive plays, get them in and out. The drives might be a little bit shorter if they go 3 and out or whatever, but they're getting more plays overall for the game. So Matt Ryan against the Texans, 21st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. I think it's a little bit there is a chance of a 3-touchdown Jonathan Taylor game where Matt Ryan throws for 150 yards and that's it. He just manages the game and doesn't score much. But if Davis Mills and the Texans are able to put up any kind of a fight and we get into maybe a little bit of a shootout, or maybe they can score 17, 21 points, the Texans, then, Matt Ryan's going to have to do something at some point, and he might end up, with 2 or 3 touchdowns in a good game. And it sort of depends on how this Colts defense plays, really. However, the Texans, they gave it the 10th most passing yards per game, 242, the 14th most passing touchdowns, 27 last year, and the 4th highest yards per attempt, 8.0. So I'm expecting an efficient game for Matt Ryan as he starts to get in tune with his weapons, Michael Pittman, et cetera, there in that Indianapolis offense.
So let's talk about one of the running backs that you like this week. Again, go to 4for4.com if you want the complete list. But one of the running backs that you like is actually a play on Monday night.
Yeah, Rashad Penny. It looks like Ken Walker's going to be out, even if he's back from this core muscle surgery. I wouldn't expect him to have much of a workload, having been out for a while and also being a rookie. Penny, we have to remember that Penny, this is not a great matchup against Denver. They're 7th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. But the Seahawks want to run the ball. They've got Geno Smith at quarterback. He's going to have to throw at some point, but they want to be a run-oriented team. And we just have to remember what Penny did late last year. He had 671 rushing yards in his final 5 games to go along with 6 touchdowns. So, the Seahawks weren't a great team last year. They did have Russell Wilson. They don't have him this year, but Penny really produced down the stretch, and he's healthy now. So, he's probably going to see at least 15 touches, if not more, in this offense. And, if the Seahawks can sort of keep it close, then he might even go over 20 carries.
John, when we covered Mizzou, we cover Mizzou. I host a radio show in St. Louis. So when we talk about Mizzou football, when this next player that's on your sneaky starts, your sneaky starts list, whenever we had to talk about him, we just revert to him as Albert O, because his last name difficult to pronounce. So I'm just going to go with Albert O, like we did when he played for Mizzou. But very talented tight end that, you thought he was going to develop some chemistry with his former quarterback, Drew Lock, who also went to Mizzou. Didn't really pan out in Denver with those two guys, but now Albert O is going to face Drew Lock's current team, which is the Seahawks. Again, talented tight end. Do you think that Albert O, not only for Monday night's matchup, do you think that he could have a productive year now that Russell Wilson's in Denver?
Well, I hope so. I drafted him quite a bit. I have him in our league that I play in against with you, and I'm hoping he does break out this year. He's had a very tumultuous preseason. Was playing into the fourth quarter. I think in the second preseason game, he sat out the third game, and people took that as a positive because he, they weren't playing the starters, but he had some sort of leg injury, so they held him out. But that does indicate that they want to start him this week. Greg Dulcich is not a factor right now, and I think the concern with Albert O is blocking, but he should be in on running most of the tight end routes in this offense. He's 6'6". He runs a 4.49 40-yard dash. He posted the 5th highest yards per route run at tight end last year. So while he didn't play a lot behind Noah Fant, he was super productive when he was on the field. I'm hoping that he's kind of a gamer and comes out and makes a couple of plays in this game. The Seahawks were 28th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends last year. They've been kind of bad against tight ends, it seems, for a couple of years now. So that's been kind of a trend. And he obviously got the big quarterback upgrade and a big role upgrade with Noah Fant moving along in that trade for Russell Wilson. The one knock on him, other than the preseason not being a great situation for him playing time wise, is that Russell Wilson has a history of not throwing to his tight ends a whole lot. People speculate that he can't see over the middle of the field. So hopefully they run Albert O down the sidelines a little bit or get him over by the sidelines so Russ can kind of see around his offensive linemen there. Just going back to Russ, though, he did throw the ball a lot to Jimmy Graham. Obviously, Jimmy Graham in Seattle was a lot more in his prime and played more of a receiver role. But I think that's what Albert O is going to play for the Broncos this year. So, I think he's an interesting dart throw again on Monday Night Football.
It's always funny. Normally, mobile quarterbacks do tend to rely on their tight ends a lot. They get running around, and obviously they start to look toward the middle of the field where the tight end is. So usually that works out better that way. But yeah, for whatever reason, I don't think it's because of his height, but Russell Wilson avoiding some of the tight ends is kind of funny. Funny narrative.
I'm just saying, this is speculation. not me saying it.
No. John, it is always a pleasure to do these podcasts with you. We hope that everybody enjoyed the first video version of the Most Accurate Podcast, at least for John and I. We're going to be doing this each and every Friday. We're going to be recording, and then we'll post it, and then hopefully everybody uses the information and wins big on Sunday and on Monday. But we'll be back every single Friday right here for the Most Accurate Podcast. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, at 444_John is where you can follow John on Twitter, at Anthony Stalter. I've given 444.com certainly a lot of plugs and for good reason. One, that's our bread and butter. That's our employer. But when it comes to John's rankings, you'll find them there. When it comes to John's sneaky starts, you'll find them there. We've got betting content as well that is always excellent at 444.com. So we hope that you check it out, and we'll see you next time. For John Paulsen, I'm Anthony Stalter on the Most Accurate Podcast.